Reminder, the new Turkish drama on Disney Plus, has completed its 8-episode run on the streaming platform. This second chance romance gave us hot chemistry and strong performances from the leads. But did this limited series stick the landing? In this podcast, I'll break down the finale and share my thoughts on the season. Let's get into it. Welcome back to Just Dizis. My name is Marjani, and today I'm reviewing the finale of Reminder, the new Turkish series on Disney Plus starring Hande, Erçel, and Barış Arduç. If you missed my recaps of the earlier episodes, I highly recommend checking those out first. You'll find the links in the description down below. As always, full spoilers ahead for episodes 5 through 8. Now, if you listened to my recap of episode 4, then you'll remember I was pretty frustrated by the sudden pregnancy reveal from Umay. It felt like the story might be veering into melodrama for the sake of shock value, and I was genuinely concerned about the direction the show was taking. But I have to give the writers credit, at least for this next part, because they didn't fall into all the typical traps. Güneş didn't run straight into Braun's arms just to escape the heartbreak and anger she felt towards Deniz. Thankfully, Braun didn't propose to her in Cappadocia. Deniz also avoided the usual cliches. He made it clear to Umay that he wasn't about to rekindle anything romantic with her just because she's pregnant. He told Umay he would be there for the baby and would be a committed and supportive co-parent, but that was the extent of it. He had no interest in reviving their relationship. And ironically, his concern and presence started to irritate Umay. Deniz was constantly hovering, checking in on her health and worried that she was pushing herself too hard at work. He could tell that the way he was showing up made Umay feel smothered rather than supported, and that friction between them immediately came to the surface. But here's the real issue. Deniz didn't tell Güneş about the pregnancy. So when she returned to Istanbul after Cappadocia, she was completely in the dark. She had no idea why Deniz was suddenly avoiding her or why he'd come back to Istanbul with Umay. And that silence, his refusal to tell her the truth, left her confused and hurt. The two of them didn't come face to face again until Hakan and Özgen invited them, along with the rest of their friends, to a group dinner to announce their engagement. And yes, I said engagement. Hakan and Özgen basically went from confessing their feelings to planning a wedding in the span of a single episode. I'm pretty sure they had no more than 4 minutes of screen time together between their love confession and their engagement announcement. The relationship moved at lightning speed. But even though their storyline felt rushed, their dinner did serve a narrative purpose. It brought Deniz and Güneş back into the same room for the first time since the pregnancy reveal, and their conversation is emotionally loaded. You could see the pain written all over Güneş's face. She's still so clearly in love with this man, and she doesn't understand why he keeps pushing her away and why he won't fight for what they had. Deniz is clearly struggling too. He's carrying this huge secret about Umay's pregnancy, and he knows that if he tells Güneş the truth, it would end things between them for good. You can see the regret on his face. He's heartbroken, not just because of the situation, but because the realization has finally hit him. This might really be the end of his love story with Güneş. I think Deniz still believed, deep down, that there was a path back to Güneş, that one day, when they had worked through their trust issues, they might be able to find their way back to each other. But I also think he was waiting for Güneş to change. He thought that if she gave up her career as a social media influencer, if she stepped away from the public eye, that all their problems would be solved. He was wrong, of course, but that was the fantasy he held on to. Now, with Umay being pregnant, that fantasy has collapsed. That future with Güneş he thought might be possible now feels lost, maybe forever. During their conversation, Deniz asked Güneş if she's serious about Braun, and Güneş is furious. She can't believe he has the audacity to question her when he's the one who left Cappadocia with Umay without so much as an explanation. Deniz tells Güneş he's keeping a promise to Umay, but he wishes he could go back in time to when he and Güneş first met. But instead of bringing them closer, his comments only push her further away. Güneş can't believe he's talking about keeping promises to Umay when he didn't even try to keep the one he made to her. And so once again, Güneş is left in tears, carrying all the weight of this heartbreak while Deniz hides behind silence and guilt. The next time Deniz and Güneş cross paths, it's when Ege goes missing. Naturally, the two of them team up to find him, and it's a subtle but important moment. Despite everything that's happened, when a crisis hits, they still instinctively lean on each other. That kind of connection doesn't just disappear. They eventually find Ege in a park, perfectly fine, but in true Ege fashion, he drops a truth bomb with zero filter. Right in front of Güneş, he blurts out that Deniz only realized he loved her after losing her. Deniz is of course mortified, but Güneş, on the other hand, can't help but smile. However, this touching moment doesn't last long. Shortly after, Ganesh is informed that paparazzi photos of her and Baran from Cappadocia have been leaked online. The media frenzy kicks off fast, and the headlines all make the same assumption, that Baran is Mr. Alpha. But Ganesh's followers are skeptical. They sense something is off, and the backlash is intense. And this is when Baran sees an opening. With the world assuming he's Mr. Alpha, he shows up to Ganesh's apartment and tries to take the relationship to the next level. He finally confesses to Ganesh that he had bought her house in Cappadocia and he had planned to propose to her there. But Ganesh doesn't see this as a romantic gesture, and rightfully so. She asks him if he expects something in return, questioning whether this is a transactional exchange disguised as love. Baran insists it's not. He says buying the house was a good investment and that he just wants to support her. But then he asks Ganesh if she would once again wear the engagement ring he gave her in episode 1. And that's when Ganesh finally draws a firm boundary. She tells him no. She's no longer interested in pursuing a romantic relationship with him, and she makes that very clear. Baran walks away disappointed, but not defeated, and will later come to learn why he's taking this rejection so well. Now, fast forward a full week after the photos have been leaked. The public still esteems Baran as Mr. Alpha, and Denise hasn't reached out to Ganesh, not once. Ganesh begins to worry that Denise is upset that Baran has been labeled as Mr. Alpha, so she decides to go see him. And that's when Denise finally tells her the truth. Umay is pregnant. It hits Ganesh like a ton of bricks, because in her mind, despite everything, she still had hope. Just like Denise, she believed that they would find their way back to each other. But with this news, that hope is now shattered. In her eyes, this pregnancy feels like the end, the final nail in the coffin, and she storms out of Denise's house in tears. Denise, who couldn't bring himself to look her in the eye, just lets her go. Not long after Ganesh learns about Umay's pregnancy, we get another major bombshell, this time courtesy of Baran. He has a chance encounter with Umay at a bar and offers to buy her a drink. Umay instantly recognizes him but pretends she doesn't. When she casually asks if they've met before, Baran smugly responds that he's a rising social media star, clearly enjoying the attention. Umay introduces herself as a photographer who's interviewing for a job. And surprise, it turns out she's interviewing for a role at Baran's new magazine, which he's calling Mr. Alpha. He goes on to explain that his relationship with Ganesh is purely business, an image he cultivated to help launch the magazine and elevate his public profile. Umay keeps up the act, pretending not to know any of this, but you can tell from her face that she's absorbing every word and storing it away to use against Ganesh later. So Baran's mask has finally slipped, and he's revealed himself to be a major scumbag. Everything we've seen from Baran this season has all been part of a bigger scheme. He never truly loved Ganesh. He was never just a nice guy who wanted to support her career. His goal all along has been to piggyback off of Ganesh's success and use her to build his own brand. Looking back, it all makes sense. Baran was too perfect. He always said the right thing, never got jealous of Denise, and was constantly eager to be seen in public. Now we know why. His endgame was fame, not love. And then we arrive at one of the most pivotal episodes in the entire series, Hakan and Ozgun's wedding. Every major character is there, including Umay, who shows up to the wedding on Denise's arm, because Hakan, for some reason, thought it was a good idea to invite her. Baran also crashes the wedding, completely uninvited. When Ganesh asks him why he's there, he insists he just wants to be supportive, as a friend. But of course, that's not the real reason, because we see a photographer lurking in the background, trying to snap photos of Ganesh and Baran together. And it's clear that Baran hired him. Thankfully, Ganesh shuts him down. She tells him she's no longer writing about Mr. Alpha, so he doesn't need to pretend to be Mr. Alpha anymore. She thanks him for his support, but makes it clear she only wants to be friends, nothing more. And Baran agrees to leave the wedding. But unfortunately for him, the photographer doesn't get any good shots of him with Ganesh, and Baran is furious. And at this point, it becomes clear. He was the one who leaked the photos of them in Cappadocia. Now he's trying to stage more photos of the two of them to back Ganesh into a corner and force her to maintain the lie that he's Mr. Alpha. Unfortunately, the wedding planner comes to his rescue. Recognizing Baran from the viral Cappadocia photos, she decides to officially add him to the guest list so he can stay at the wedding. I was so annoyed by this because she didn't bother to check with Ganesh or Ozgun first. It felt like a major overstep. Meanwhile, right before the ceremony, Ozgun and Hakan get into a fight. Ozgun is stressed and frustrated with Hakan because he didn't help her with planning the wedding, and he didn't even show up to the rehearsal. He also didn't prepare a speech, and it's all catching up to him at the last minute. Denise and Ganesh step in to mediate, and that's when we get a truly beautiful moment from them. Güneş pulls Ozgun aside and tells her that love isn't about grand romantic gestures. It's the everyday, ordinary moments where you feel supported and valued by your partner. At the same time, Deniz is having a nearly identical conversation with Hakan. And while neither Güneş nor Deniz mention each other by name, it's so obvious they're both speaking from the heart about their own love story. Eventually, they succeed in getting Ozgun and Hakan to reconcile and go through with the wedding. And throughout the ceremony, Deniz and Güneş kept stealing glances at each other all night. And of course, Umay and Baran both notice. Speaking of Baran, he runs into Umay at the wedding and confronts her for pretending not to know him at the bar. He suggests they team up to keep Deniz and Güneş apart, but Umay brushes him off. At this point, she still thinks the pregnancy is enough to hold on to Deniz. Then we get to the moment the entire season has been building towards. During the reception, Güneş leaves the dance floor to grab Ozgun's wedding speech, and Deniz immediately follows her. He quarters her in the hallway, and they get into a heated exchange, which quickly leads into an even hotter kiss. Now, this is the same steamy, passionate scene we saw at the start of episode 1, the kiss that kicked off the entire series. So we finally come full circle, and we now know that the kiss happened at Ozgun and Hakan's wedding. And more importantly, we now learn the mysterious person who witnessed it was none other than Umay. After following Deniz, she saw Güneş and Deniz locked in a hot and heavy makeout session, and she runs off in tears. But Umay isn't the only one secretly spying on Deniz and Güneş. During their passionate makeout, we see Baran's photographer lurking outside and snapping photos of a shirtless Deniz on top of Güneş. And let's be honest, it was a hot scene. So the photos captured every seamy moment. The photographer quickly leaks the photos online without checking with Baran. And when Baran sees the photos, he's livid because Deniz's face is clearly visible. In that instant, Deniz is outed to the world as the real Mr. Alpha. With Deniz's identity exposed in such an intimate way, Baran's entire scheme to hijack that persona is officially dead, along with his plans to launch his own Mr. Alpha magazine. While licking his wounds outside the wedding reception, Baran runs into Umay, who's holding an alcoholic drink. And Baran clocks instantly that Umay isn't pregnant. She faked the pregnancy to manipulate Deniz and keep him away from Güneş, but it clearly failed. So Umay decides to partner with Baran in a last-ditch effort to drive a permanent wedge between Deniz and Güneş. Because Umay isn't just trying to win Deniz back, she's determined to marry him. And I have to say, I've never been so thrilled to learn that a pregnancy was fake. It was predictable, yes, but also deeply satisfying. Since announcing her pregnancy, Umay's behavior has just been odd. Rather than softening towards Deniz and trying to rebuild their connection, she was cold, combative, and constantly annoyed with him, especially when he tried to support her. That's not the energy of someone who's about to bring a child into the world and needs to figure out how to co-parent. It's the behavior of someone maintaining a lie that's not working out the way they planned. If her goal was to win Deniz's love by faking a pregnancy, then constantly bickering with him wasn't the way to do it. She never made an effort to show warmth or vulnerability, and now her desperation is driving her to manipulate him even further. But here's where things get even messier. At this point, Deniz and Güneş have reconnected physically and emotionally. After sleeping together at the wedding, they're both on cloud 9. Güneş is glowing because the weight of Mr. Alpha has finally been lifted. She and Deniz can now move forward with no more lies and no more hiding. And she's visibly happy. She even smiles while looking at the leaked photos of her and Deniz. And honestly, I don't blame her. If I looked like that in pictures with the man I loved, I'd probably frame them. Shockingly, Deniz is happy too. For a man who's been fiercely protective of his identity all season, he doesn't seem bothered at all by the leaked photos showing his face. It's a huge 180 turn for him, and it shows real growth. Umay's pregnancy and the fear of losing Güneş for good forced him to reevaluate his priorities. His career, his privacy, his image, all of that suddenly took a backseat to what he felt for Güneş. But that high doesn't last long. Deniz's boss calls him in for a meeting after the photos go viral. Not only has Deniz been exposed as Mr. Alpha, but now their clients are demanding answers, especially since Güneş once featured him in an ad campaign for a rival company. That incident was what originally ended their relationship, and now it's back to haunt them both. Deniz's boss is furious. He tells Deniz he needs to leave the country to lay low and avoid further scandal. So he's being sent to London to oversee a long-term project that could keep him away for at least a year. And suddenly, Deniz is faced with an impossible choice. On the one hand, he can stay and be with Güneş, but risk losing his job and his professional future. On the other hand, he can go to London with Umay at his side so he can be present for the birth of his child. Of course, we know there's no child, but he's not aware of this just yet. Even though he's not in a relationship with Umay, he doesn't want her to go through the pregnancy and childbirth alone. So he asked Umay to move to London with him. Now, this decision baffled me. I couldn't understand why traveling back and forth wasn't an option. Why relocate her entirely? Maybe there are visa issues to consider, but it still felt like an extreme and unnecessary solution. Umay, of course, seizes this opportunity. She tells Deniz she'll go to London with him, but only if they get legally married. She's not uprooting her life and moving to another country unless there's some legal protection for her and her fake child. And you know what? This was a brilliant move on her part. Deniz is now forced to consider marrying her, and Umay isn't fazed at all by his declaration that this marriage of convenience is only a formality and wouldn't rekindle any romantic relationship between them. Shortly after speaking with Umay, Deniz meets up with Güneş for coffee, and she walks into the restaurant looking radiant, clearly still riding the high of the reunion. But the moment she sees Deniz's face, her smile fades. She can sense immediately that something's wrong. When she asks Deniz about it, Deniz tells her he's dealing with trouble at work. He explains that the leaked photos has caused problems with his client, and now he's being sent to London. At first, Güneş assumes it's just a short trip, but when Deniz clarifies that it's a long-term relocation, you can see her heart drop. She tells him that her own career is on the line too. With Mr. Alpha's identity revealed, her magazine might have no use for her anymore. But unlike Deniz, she's willing to put their relationship first. Deniz doesn't commit to anything. He just tells her to trust him, that he'll figure everything out. But he's not convincing at all. And worst of all, he doesn't tell her his plans to relocate with Umay, nor their potential marriage. And I'm just sitting there thinking, how is she supposed to trust you when you're hiding this massive decision that directly affects your future together? Güneş, understandably, is hurt and angry. She cuts the conversation short and tells him they'll talk later. Next, we see Güneş visit the wedding planner to find out who the photographer was that leaked the photos of her and Deniz. The wedding planner shows her security camera footage from the event, and not only does Güneş identify the photographer, but she also sees that Umay was the one who spied on her making out with Deniz. The wedding planner helps her to track down the photographer, who confirms that Baran was the one who hired him. And armed with this truth, Güneş goes to meet with Baran, who of course was thrilled to hear from her. Baran assumed this is his shot to worm his way back into her life, but Güneş shuts that door immediately. She tells him point blank that she knows he hired the photographer, that he leaked the photos, and that his whole Mr. Alpha scheme has been exposed. Baran initially denies it, but then switches tactics and says he only did it to help her career. But Güneş doesn't buy it, not anymore. She sees him for exactly who he is. She tells him she's in love with Deniz and she doesn't need Mr. Alpha anymore. Then she walks away from Baran for good. Unfortunately for Güneş, another heartbreak is waiting around the corner. Deniz and Umay visit the wedding planner, the same one who just helped Güneş uncover Baran's schemes. It seems Deniz is actually moving forward with plans to legally marry Umay, but Umay insists on having a full wedding ceremony. So the wedding planner casually informs Güneş that Deniz and Umay are planning a wedding. And of course, Güneş assumes the worst. She has no idea that this supposed wedding is only meant to be a legal formality, a paper marriage between co-parents, at least in Deniz's mind. All Güneş thinks is that the man she loves is about to marry another woman without bothering to tell her. It's too much. The betrayal, the pain, the emotional whiplash, it all catches up to her. So she makes a drastic but completely understandable decision to leave Istanbul and move to the US with her sister. Staying in her apartment, surrounded by reminders of Deniz and their love story, is just too painful. And just as I was getting angry with Deniz for going along with this marriage plan behind Güneş's back, Baran unexpectedly shows up to confront the wedding planner for exposing his scheme to Güneş. But then he spots Umay, and things explode. He lashes out at Umay, and when Deniz asks what's going on, Baran becomes vindictive and decides that if he can't have Güneş, then Umay doesn't get to have Deniz either. And with that, he drops the bomb. Umay isn't pregnant. Deniz is stunned. He immediately confronts her, demanding to know the truth. But Umay tries to deflect. She blames him, saying she felt forced to lie because he made her compete with Güneş for his affections. But Deniz doesn't entertain this for a second. He walks away feeling absolutely relieved because now he's no longer bound to Umay by obligation or guilt. He's completely free to be with Güneş. But Güneş doesn't answer his call since she turned off her phone. So Deniz turns to Hakan asking for help. And that's when he learns that Ganesh is moving to the US. And Denise rushes off to find her. Meanwhile, Ganesh is packing up the last of her belongings in her apartment, and she notices the large package that's been sitting there since episode 1. It was meant for Denise, but he always refused to take it, telling her to open it or throw it away. And finally, she opens it. Inside, she finds tokens from their relationship, a replica of the ferry where they first met, photos of them together, a dog collar from the pet they briefly had. Every item is a memory, and the flood of emotions it releases brings Ganesh to tears. Then she finds a letter from Denise. In it, he says he still believes in their love and that he wishes he could go back in time to the day they first met, and that every sunset, he goes to the ferry hoping to see her again. Ganesh immediately tries to call him, but this time he doesn't answer his phone. So she rushes to the ferry terminal, desperate to find him, hoping that maybe he's there. But she arrives just as the ferry is pulling away from the dock, and she desperately calls his name, thinking she missed him again. But of course, Denise is standing right behind her, and she's relieved, but also a little mad at him for not answering his phone and scaring her. Denise asks Ganesh why she didn't open the package sooner, but he doesn't wait for an answer. Instead, he kisses her passionately, pouring everything he's been holding back into the kiss. It's beautiful and cinematic, and the chemistry is off the charts. It's the perfect conclusion to their love story, even though we didn't get a flash forward or a marriage proposal. The flashbacks of their previous relationship that were scattered throughout the series were more than enough to help the audience imagine what's ahead for them. We can leave this series with the confidence that Ganesh and Denise can build a new chapter, this time with honesty, mutual support, and room for both of their careers to thrive. So, with all that being said, did this series stick the landing? Honestly, yes and no. When it comes to the central love story, this second chance romance between Güneş and Deniz, the show absolutely delivered. Their arc felt satisfying, emotionally grounded, and complete. The chemistry, the heartbreak, the growth, it was all there. So if you were watching just for them, you probably left with a full heart. But when it comes to literally everything else, the show didn't land quite as smoothly. It was clear that the writers poured most of their energy into the emotional journey of Güneş and Deniz. And while that worked beautifully for their storyline, it came at the expense of every other character and subplot. The supporting characters felt paper thin. Many of their storylines were rushed or underdeveloped to the point that I couldn't get emotionally invested in any of them, even when the show wanted me to. I've mentioned this in earlier recaps, but it bears repeating. Umay and Baran felt more like plot devices than fully formed characters. And believe me, I understand that when you're dealing with limited runtime, antagonists don't always get full backstories. But it was obvious the show intended to flesh them out, but it just didn't follow through. Take Baran, for example. In the finale, Güneş confronts him and asks if he's still being scolded by his father, and if that's why he's acting the way he is. That line was clearly meant to hint at deeper emotional trauma or motivation for Baran, but that was the one and only time Baran's father was ever mentioned. It was dropped in like an afterthought, and it felt lazy. Then there's Bren. She had the potential to be a compelling side character, and we got glimpses of an emotional arc for her, especially when she confides in Güneş that she's strong enough to take care of herself, but she doesn't want to do it all alone. That line was powerful and relatable, but because Beren barely got any screen time outside of just being Güneş's supportive best friend, that moment didn't hit as hard as it should have. And her happy ending in the finale, where she meets a potential love interest, just felt tacked on. Even Hakan and Özkan, who got the most narrative attention outside of the main couple, felt rushed. Their relationship had promise in the early episodes, but their romance was so fast-tracked that by the time we got to the wedding, it didn't feel like we had earned that payoff. That said, I don't think this is a problem that's unique to Reminder. This is something I've noticed with a lot of Turkish dramas that air on digital platforms. When you reduce the episode runtime to 40 or 50 minutes, compared to the traditional 2-hour episodes on network television, you lose a lot of breathing room. The pacing gets tighter, sure, but that often comes at the expense of depth. Supporting storylines suffer, emotional beats get rushed. There's just not enough time to give every story arc the attention it needs. Finding that optimal balance is a skill that many writers struggle with. Which brings me to my final takeaway. I feel Reminder might have worked better as a 2-hour movie rather than an 8-episode series. The core storyline, the love story between Güneş and Deniz, was strong enough to carry a film, but the rest of the subplots could have been trimmed. And even some of the flashbacks could have been reduced to tighten the pacing. As a movie, it could have delivered the same emotional impact without feeling stretched or underdeveloped. But despite its flaws, I genuinely enjoyed Reminder. It was a satisfying, if uneven, ride, and more than anything, it left me wanting to see more of Hande Erçel and Barış Arduç on screen together. Their chemistry is unreal, and they carried the series from start to finish. I don't need a second season of Reminder. I feel that story ended in the right place, but I'm very excited for their new project. As many of you already know, Hande and Barış will be reuniting for a third time in the upcoming Turkish remake of the K-drama Queen of Tears. Now, I absolutely loved Queen of Tears, so I truly can't wait to see what the Turkish adaptation brings, especially with this powerhouse duo at the center. Well, those are my final thoughts on Reminder. Thank you so much for tuning into these recaps. It's been such a joy to break the series down with you every week. If you're watching on YouTube, let me know your thoughts on the series in the comments below. And if you're enjoying Just Dizis, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this podcast with your fellow Turkish drama lovers. And I'll catch you next time.